God, this is the best Christmas ever. And it's very simple, okay?
Professor ContraPoints.
You are not a woman. That is a fact.
A little while ago, Derek Jensen gave a speech where he compiled and condemned many statements that had been openly published by prominent queer theorists which defended child sexual abuse. I took the footage of this speech, edited out most of the heckling, and cut it together with a David Cross stand-up bit on sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. It was a great video, and I was awesome for doing that. Then, about a month ago, an Australian breadtube-adjacent gender theist named Bad Empanada made a video about how he believed that Michel Foucault had sex with minors as a sex tourist.
Commonly called the godfather of queer theory.
Who is Foucault?
Who is Foucault?
Who wants to learn about how Michel Foucault was a pedophile? That is a fact. Michel Foucault was not just a pedophile, but a sex tourist pedophile.
And he offers pretty convincing evidence for his argument. The troubling thing is that Bad Empanada stops there. He doesn't make the connection to the rest of queer theory, even though there is open pedophilia apologia in what is considered to be the movement's founding document.
And since you're not believing me, quote, this is in the founding document of queer theory. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory.
The only hint that Empanada might give to having an opinion on the rest of these creeps is when he says that he doesn't believe the stuff about postmodern Marxism.
Now, I'm not saying this because I think we need to discount everything that Foucault said. I don't believe that he was a postmodern neo-Marxist. I found a lot of use in a lot of his theory.
As an anti-postmodernist Marxist myself, I also agree that there's no such thing as postmodern Marxism. It's an absurd notion, like a male woman or a female man. The CIA actually paid Foucault and a bunch of those postmodernists, specifically in France, because they were worried about the influence that Marxist academia would have on the US's ability to intervene into countries around the world, and particularly in Latin America. By obscuring this history, right-wingers get to paint this problem as being an outgrowth of Marxism or socialism or something like that, when in reality their fucking fingerprints are all over it.
I don't believe that he was a postmodern neo-Marxist.
However, what this statement may also be a nod to is the idea that Empanada understands that some people think that the nefarious pro-child sexual abuse agenda of queer theory extends well beyond its godfather to other members of the furry clergy. But only Empanada himself would really be able to confirm that. Regardless, his video was reason enough to dust off the old Derek Jensen clips and put out a new video, which I did. Bad Empanada has yet to respond. Then something amazing happened. Bad Empanada, on his second channel, Bad Empanada 2, put out a video discussing all the evidence that has been publicly compiled of Vaush advocating for various forms of child sexual abuse.
There's a master post on some subreddit that just lists all the evidence of Vaush being a pedophile, so I wouldn't even have to go over it myself. Vaush is obsessed with pedophilia and child porn.
In fact, and this is going to be a real hot take, I have yet to hear a convincing moral or legal argument as to why possession of child pornography should be illegal. Actual child pornography.
So yeah, that's fucking gross.
The ironic thing is that while what appears to be Bad Empanada's clueless apologia for queer theory,
the only real women are trans women,
is nowhere near as horrifying as the evidence against Vaush, it still remains the case that many of the things which Bad Empanada says in relation to Vaush can just as easily be applied to Bad Empanada himself or to queer theory in general. In the following clips, all I had to do was change some of the dates, names, and pronouns. Other than that, the arguments have overwhelmingly been left intact.
I was living in a devil town.
I mean, he said that same thing like 5 times, yet somehow we're supposed to believe that it's not incredibly suspect that he would, bring that up so much for some reason. Like, I'll tell you right now, no one who is not like a secret pedophile would say anything like that. Maybe like once, like as a joke or something, a really shitty joke, but not like consistently over the course of
decades.
Now,
They have
stopped saying this since then because they realized how absolutely untenable it is for
them
as someone who wants to make money online to keep saying shit like this. So
they have
I have to dial it back. There's so much more.
they
He said that exact same thing so many times. It is beyond suspect. Jesus, man. Like, there's no context where anything that
they are
saying here is remotely not suspect, okay? Normal people don't utter the words that
they are
uttering here. This is not a thing that people would ever even think to say unless they actually think this. Normal people do not think about the effecality of
Boy lovers.
even having this thought indicates
queer theory.
probably a pedo. I'm sorry. And he makes that comparison between child porn and blood diamonds, which makes no sense whatsoever. Because obviously, you can never have ethical child porn. You could have ethical mining of diamonds. But like these are not things that you say unless you are invested in
Boy lovers
Or
forms of incest.
being moral or legal in some way personally, okay? If
Professor ContraPoints.
fans saw this level of evidence for someone being like a covert pedo, for basically anyone they dislike, they would absolutely accept it as more than enough.
ContraPoint is now dealing with alcoholic depressive bouts because of the drama she's received. In this instance, for including a trans medicalist in a 12-second segment.
Things are not going well.
Yet instead, because it's they're
a
fucking
member of the clergy of furries.
they defend this shit, this absolutely abominable shit.
They have
I've been bringing this up since
1984. They have
been on this train for a very long fucking time. This is not normal. Anyone who does not think about child porn often would talk about it this much. The only time that I've actually ever even thought about child pornography in the last like 2 years is because of
queer theorists.
the only time that I talk about it is in regards to
Queer theorists.
defending
Pedophilia.
Or
Forms of incest.
constantly for years and years and years.
queer theorists.
Talked about it
Communism
openly.
is based.
Did pretty much everything aside from outright saying that
Queer theorists
he likes kids,
themselves.
and then only stopped doing so once
They-
he realized that it was looking pretty bad for
Them.
in terms of
Their
profile.
Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult.
Like,
queer theorists.
it's always like look at that sort of clip and they're like, oh no, it was just
Gail Rubin.
was making a comparison between this exploitation involved in both, blah 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 blah. What
She
he's saying there, he's trying to equate
Pedophilia.
or
Forms of incest.
with normal things like,
Communists and homosexuals in the 1950s.
right? It's like the same thing as if I were to say like, oh, the Holocaust is the same as me having to get a COVID passport. Right? In that respect, I would be diminishing the significance of the Holocaust and making getting a COVID passport sound far worse than it is. So when you compare
Communists and homosexuals in the 1950s.
to
Pedophilia.
or
Forms of incest.
what you're doing is normalizing.
Pedophilia.
That's why
they are.
saying that.
They are.
Trying to make it seem less bad than it really is. God, this is the best Christmas ever. Next thing, God, this is long, man. There's a lot of material here. Like, this is
Queer theorists
identifies
themselves.
like ironically as a pedophile, and
They-
he tries to reduce the severity of
Pedophilia.
Or
Forms of incest.
like the moral severity of that so often, so consistently, or at least
They-
did before he realized it was bad for
their
the brand. And there's such a long history of it that you can't look at this evidence and say that there's not something fucked up going on here. I wouldn't be surprised if this would be probable cause for like a fucking FBI raid or something. If someone tipped them off, like honestly, what the fuck? There's so much here.
queer theorists.
Trying to equate two things that are not even remotely equatable.
Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers.
Two things that are not even remotely equatable because
They-
he wants to make child porn seem more acceptable because from the looks of it, there's very good probable cause to believe that
Queer theory. Pro.
pedophile. Most people, if they were able to disconnect themselves emotionally from someone with this amount of dirt right out there, such a long history of like apologizing for or identifying with pedophiles or like child porn and stuff, defending it, and what he's
They are.
doing there is a defense, make no mistake, you would think that they were a pedophile. The only reason to think otherwise is because you like this creator. It's more than enough evidence for anything like anything short of like an actual judicial proof, like an actual court conviction. This is more than enough. Like the average person in
Professor ContraPoints.
community, if they saw this exact same evidence but for Destiny or someone who they didn't like, you know, like fucking Caleb Maupin or someone, they'd be all over it. It's only because it's
Queer theory.
that they're not. There's more than enough evidence in all of the shit that I click there, and that's not even all of it. I've seen more than that. Far more than enough evidence there for us as like normal people. You know, we aren't a court of law, but we are normal people, to consider
Queer theory to be pro.
pedophile. You would think that that amount of evidence, that amount of compounding evidence altogether, where
An ideology.
someone is incredibly obsessed with this subject, or at least they were incredibly obsessed until they realized it was bad for their PR, talks about
Forms of incest.
and pedophilia so fucking much with actual evidence that Michel Foucault was a pedophile. Like this is indefensible. Anyone who defend like the fucking talking points that they have, who goes around the internet like defending
Queer theory.
from pedophilia allegations, is a reprehensible piece of shit too. God, this is the best Christmas ever. Yeah, I have never heard anyone else, aside from actual out and out pedos, defending child pornography, like trying to equate it with things that it's not remotely equivalent to, like talking about how nice we need to be to pedophiles, etc. constantly. Just the pure volume of it and the consistency from
1984.
to after,
2006.
it's absolutely overwhelming. The
Ideology.
is very likely to be
Pro.
a pedophile, though the only way that we can know for sure is if the FBI gets in there and checks out those fucking hard drives. But apparently this is not enough for
Professor ContraPoints.
this community. Like this is just immeasurably overwhelming evidence.
Hey, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and most importantly, if you want Bad Empanada to see this, you have to help me share it on Twitter. So I'll put a link in the description or a pinned post, and you can help out there. Every little share, sub, comment, it all really helps.
I will never go see stand-up comedy again. Well, we are sorry that you experienced that with our services.